Hey everybody! Just a quick reminder, these stories aren't always public perfect conversation. I do use a lot of strong language in here, and I talk about some things that aren't always necessarily pleasant to hear. But I hope you still enjoy it. Also, please don't forget to check me out on everywhere you can find music and other podcasts. Mostly, follow me on Patreon. For just $1 a month, you can get ad-free content, 24 hours early access to episodes, and for $3 a month, you get the options of having community chats with me and some of the other fans. For $5 a month, you get voting powers on any changes I want to run through the fans. You also get priority requests and suggestions, live Q&As, community chats, one-on-one chats with me personally, either through messages or through calls, and maybe we can even set up a time to be a guest on the show. And of course, that's in addition to everything from the lower tiers. I'm planning on doing more with the community as it grows. With that being said, let's get into the episode. Hey everybody, welcome back. This is Stories from Behind the Counter, and as always, I'm your host, Alpha. Just gonna say this real quick reminder, please make sure wherever you're listening to me, you're commenting, subscribing, liking, whatever you can do to interact. That really does help me grow. I know I talk about it all the time. I'm just gonna make it quick today. That being said, let's go ahead and get into the episode. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about some stuff that happens to us at work that in some ways can really scar you for life. We've got perverted old people with no filters, accidents involving kids when parents aren't paying attention, and some flat out crazy people with some blatant sexist assholes. Kind of people that just make you want to quit working. Let's get into it. So this first story is from me and another coworker. We're both working up at the service desk. And I must note that this coworker of mine is a female. So it's been a calm day. Been pretty calm for most of the day, actually, which is rather rare for the service desk at any company. I'm going through some reports, and my coworker sees an older man just walking up. So she looks over and says about 3 different times, "Good morning, I can help you right over here." After the third time of her saying that, I looked up, just in time to see the old man look from me over to her with this rude-ass scowl on his face. Almost like he was pretty much telling her to shut up without actually saying anything. Then he looked over at me, very gruffly said, "I've got an order to pick up." So I go about helping him, and this guy is just being an absolute ass, pretty much the entire time. He's being very demanding, very impatient, flat out just entitled. I finally found his order in the computer system and discovered that I had to go and get it from the back of the store. So I told the customer, "Oh, go ahead and wait right here. I'll be right back with your order so I can release it from the computer and I'll get you your receipt." Well, that's when he started following me. So I turned around and repeated myself. "Oh, sir, I have to come back with your order anyway, and I have to release it in the system. So go ahead and just save yourself the walking, and I'll be right back. Go ahead and wait right here." And I continued to go and get his order. And he continued to follow me. When I finally got him his order, he said that a couple of things were wrong and he wanted them fixed. Well, I'm not very knowledgeable on the particular items he was trying to use or fix, so I called someone who was actually knowledgeable about this stuff. Luckily, the guy I called takes the customer and his order, and he gets everything fixed. Once the guy finally left, my coworker looks at me and was like, "That's what he gets for being a dick. God doesn't like ugly." The way he looked at me, he might as well have slapped me in the face and told me to shut the fuck up. And honestly, she's not wrong. I really honestly just hate people like this. All they do is they come in to make people's lives a living hell, it seems like. They try to degrade pretty much everyone they meet, anyone that they come across, whether it's another customer or especially a worker, and seemingly just live to be miserable. But My coworker's right. No matter what religion or belief you hold, most everyone agrees that karma is real, and being ugly to people comes back to you eventually. This next story is from when I was working at a big grocery store. It was fairly late in the evening. It was pretty calm in the store, not a whole lot going on. I'm in the produce section, right where produce meets the main aisle. As I'm doing what they call culling through all the bad produce, getting the bad stuff out, I look over and I see a mom and her child. The child was about 4 or 5 at oldest. The mom wasn't really watching, and her child was standing in the cart. The kid wasn't leaning over the edge or anything, but the kid was kind of leaning on the side of the basket. As the kid is standing and leaning on the side of the basket, the mom is looking at something on the shelf and takes like half a step. Doesn't even move the basket a whole lot, but it's enough to shock the kid, jolt them away because didn't have a good grip on the basket or whatever. And this kid falls, endos over the basket, and just crashed headfirst into the cement floor. It was so traumatizing to watch. That one step is all it took. I watched it happen. It seemed like in slow motion. No one could really do anything at all. I was only like 50 feet away when this happened. I barely had a chance to look up as it was happening, and needless to say, I bolted over immediately. The sounds coming from that poor child were awful, and it was very difficult to hear. The kid was obviously scared, hurt, and probably didn't understand what the hell just happened since they were so young, and it all happened so fast. The mom obviously felt absolutely terrible. My manager came over, we checked out the kid, made sure they were okay, and we tried to talk to the mom. Tried talking her into taking the kid into the ER or the urgent care just to be safe, but for whatever reason, she kept refusing. She wouldn't let us call 911 or anything like that. So we really don't know much else about what happened after the mom left the store. But I will never forget that sight or the sounds that that poor child made. Who knew retail could give you some form of PTSD, huh? This next story is from someone who wants to stay anonymous, but they tell me that they were an ASM at the time at a hardware store, and that the hardware store that they worked at is a place that contracted with a shed company. And the company comes, they build some sheds in the parking lot, and they display them out in the parking lot and sell them. There's also a representative that comes in regularly and works very closely with the store on all of this, customizing for people, blah, 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 blah. Try to get all the sales up, good times. Well, one day this manager was informed that there was something very disgusting out in the sheds that they sell in the parking lot. Now, these sheds are usually supposed to be locked at nighttime, but apparently someone forgot to lock them the night beforehand. When the ASM went out to the sheds to see what was in there, they found some, well, used bottles of lube, some condoms, a box for an adult's toy. That's all they put it at. And a handprint that he assumes was from a lube covered hand that soaked into the wood floor of the shed. Now, he says they've caught homeless people in the sheds before, sleeping in there when it's cold or stormy. They really don't get mad at that a whole lot, but they do ask them to move along most of the time. This time, someone decided it was a good idea to, rather than get a hotel room, just to use the sheds out in the parking lot of this particular store. Maybe these people were homeless, maybe they just needed a place. I don't know. But the ASM was the poor, unlucky soul that ended up having to clean it all up to the best of his abilities and talk to the rep about it. Eventually, it ended up becoming a bit of a joke between them anytime they had to walk past that particular shed. But somehow, at one point, they managed to sell this shed that still had the stain of a handprint about a year later. When he did it, he came and he told the assistant manager that he sold it, and they were both so ecstatic and they could not help but laugh all day about it. They were both very happy to be rid of that shed. Now, this is me speaking as Alpha. Holy hell, I've dealt with some stuff in retail. Dealt with some pretty disgusting stuff, usually involves bodily fluids, but not so much that one. Good lord, people. Okay, so this next story is another one from me. And I guess depending on who you are and your level of humor, or just the ability to look at the glass half full, I guess, this was an interesting situation. I'm working at a retail store as a supervisor, and an elderly lady comes up to me and asks me for some help. She says that she's a stroke survivor and she has minimal use of one of her arms. Her husband had just recently broke one of his arms, so he wasn't much better off than she was. She asked me if I could help her replace these little plastic light covers that she just bought. Ones that you'd usually typically see in like an office building, just that thin, flimsy, giant square that you put up to cover up the lights. They really are quite fragile, so of course I tell her no problem. She gives me the old ones that they accidentally broke trying to load into the car, and she takes me to where she got them originally. Well, as we're walking toward what she needs, she tells me, "You know, you remind me of a young man I dated a long time ago." "Oh, don't worry. They're good memories." "Best sex ever." Well, what else can you do at that point? I just kind of laughed and I told her I was glad I could bring up some good memories for her. Obviously, at that point, I tried to just kind of hurry up, get her light covers, and get her to her car and get her on her way. Oh, the things you have to deal with in retail. This next story is from a coworker that's written in before. Her name is Indy. Indy writes in, "Recently, I had an old couple come up to the register, and they had 2 rolls of paracord, some nuts, and some bolts. Nothing crazy. As I'm finishing up with the customer in front of them, all I hear is the old lady waiting in line tell her husband, 'Well, now all I gotta do is tie you up.' I don't think she realized how loudly she had said it until I looked over at her in shock, and then I just busted out giggling like a little kid. I just about died of laughter. Every time her and I would look over at each other, we both just kept laughing. That transaction made my day, but boy, the things you hear in retail." Yeah, Indy, that's actually, thank goodness, one of the rather tame ones. There's a couple of things that have been said at the registers that, luckily enough, I have forgotten because I know I went home drinking a couple of times hearing some of the things coming out of some of these people's mouths. What can you do? Gotta work to live. This next story is from someone that we'll call KK. KK was working at a mental health clinic at one point, and over the weekend, a customer had called the clinic and left a message. That, in itself, is not really out of the ordinary. Some people call over the weekend to set up appointments, or, some of them need to get prescription refills, whatever. Not that uncommon. This message, however, was from an elderly lady in her 70s talking about how she just needs some dick and she needs it now. This voicemail was 3 solid minutes. KK ended up saving the message for her boss to take care of later. She really doesn't remember hearing anything else about this particular situation, but she had never fielded a call like that, and thank goodness she never had to again. But it was definitely one for the books, or in this case, one for the podcast. This is me speaking as Alpha again. I can only imagine. I'm honestly surprised that that is one of the worst stories you had from dealing with mental health clinic. I know there's a lot of stories you got to be careful with, and if you do tell them, they've got to be very vague anyway, due to HIPAA laws and all sorts of stuff like that. But that in it itself is surprisingly tame for what I was expecting when you said a mental health clinic. Thank goodness it didn't get worse for you. Let's move on to the next story. This one is from someone who also wants to stay anonymous. We're just going to call him the paint guy. The paint guy is working in a hardware store, obviously in the paint department. Now, I'm sure we've all seen it before anywhere that sells any kind of paint, especially spray paint. People will take it to quote unquote test the color, and they test it on the shelves, on the floors, anywhere they can and want. Well, these days, a lot of stores have been trying to figure out ways to get them to stop doing that. That way, their store doesn't look like trash. Who'd have thunk? Kind of like when you're at home, you hopefully don't want your home to look like trash, right? Quit doing it, people. Anyway, we know that for whatever reason, we won't ever get people to stop testing anything, no matter what we tell them. So we decided to at least redirect where they tested everything. So they set up this easel right next to the paint counter. And one morning, the paint guy says he showed up to work, and either a closing associate or a customer before we closed at night decided to show off their artistic skill with some bright fluorescent pink paint. They decided to paint a giant hot pink dick all over the easel. Luckily enough, it was just on some paper, so we were able to easily rip it off and replace it. Because, I mean, what else can you do? The paint guy says, sadly, this happened fairly consistently for a couple of weeks before it finally stopped. We don't know if people just got tired of doing it, they got bored, or if it was an associate and they finally got caught. He doesn't know, so it is what it is. At least it stopped. This is me speaking as Alpha. Yeah, that's something that happens everywhere, and it's not even just in like paint departments. That's gonna happen in bathrooms, it's gonna happen in cosmetic stores. I know when I was working in cosmetics in one store, I had people graffiti all the time with the nail polish and the lipstick, and that was always very fun trying to figure out which ones had been used and which ones had touched the dirty shelves so that people don't put it to their lips or whatever else. People just suck. People, please, stop fucking doing this. Grow up. Think. But I know it's not going to stop. So let's just go ahead and move on to the last story. This next story is from someone who's actually also trying to get a social media presence as well as me. You can actually find him on TikTok and on Facebook. He gave me permission to use some of his stuff, and he's been sending me a couple stories here and there. So every once in a while, I'm going to actually talk about his stories, some of the stuff you can see on his page. And I will be calling him by his social media presence name. So this segment is stories from Chuck Moat, the car guy. So just a little detail about Chuck. He's not just a car guy in as much as like a mechanic or a big fan of cars. He is literally a car salesman. So this makes things interesting when you're constantly trying to sell cars and you have to deal with a multitude of people. Chuck did a post a few years back, and he thought I'd really enjoy this story, so he told me he wanted this to be the first story I tell on his part. Chuck says, so I'm on the craziest test drive I've ever been on. This test drive started out with a nice, slow, wide-ass turn into ongoing traffic. Horn works, so that's nice. This customer here likes to do U-turns on red lights and stop on green lights. He also stops 2 car lengths behind cars at every light. He continues to honk his horn because he wants to make sure it works. He cruises at a very comfortable 20 to 22 miles per hour on the on-ramp to the highway. He also comes to a near complete stop when he turns. Other people's horns work great, and so far, 2 people have shown this customer that he is number 1 in their hearts. Isn't that special? We left the dealership to go to the bank. He made it to the interstate before doing a U-turn because he forgot something in his trade-in. We get back to the dealership, and I grab what he needed. We get to the bank, and he goes through the drive-thru to tell them that he needs to speak to a banker. They ask him to park up front, but he is displeased. Either way, he pulls up front. After nearly curb checking, he realizes he didn't bring his little scooter thing. I had told him to bring it, by the way. Back to the dealership we go. We got back to the dealership, throw his scooter chair into the trunk, and off to the bank we go. We get back to the bank, and we park, and I help him out, and he says, "Well, I sure hope they don't require any checking info, because I don't have any of that on me. It's in the trade-in." I happily shoved him through the front doors to the bank. Now, here I am, sitting and waiting in the potential car that I hope to sell, looking forward to the ride back to the dealership. This is me speaking as Alpha. Holy shit, Chuck. That is, I'm just not a good passenger as it is. I can full on admit that to anyone, anytime. I am not a good passenger. I'd much prefer to drive. So being in a job where you have to be in the car for the test drive, that's a scary thought within itself. You're a brave man. But I want to hear more stories from you about stuff like this. I'm sure this is not necessarily one of the craziest things you've had since this post. So if you think of any, please absolutely email me, or I hope to one day maybe even have you on here. That would be awesome. Chuck, you're an awesome guy. Thank you for essentially collabing with me to a point right now. We're hoping to work out a schedule where I can have him on here and maybe he could tell some of these stories himself. Having said that, I think we're going to go ahead and call this an episode. Thanks again for listening, guys. As always, I appreciate everyone who's been listening, and especially those who've been sending me their stories. Again, whatever I call you on the show is all you will ever be known as. And of course, I want to give a big shout out to Denise Esparza from Nisi Art on Instagram. She's the one who's responsible for the thumbnails that you guys see when I upload my episodes. Check her out on Instagram if you want to see what else she can do. I want to give a shout out to Nivation as well for the intro and the outro music that's provided for the show. You can find Nivation on Spotify and on Facebook. Nivation, Denise, you guys are awesome, and I appreciate both of you for helping me keep this going. With all that being said, this is Alpha signing off. Stay fabulous, everyone.